Good evening, and welcome to Mythoria. Long before marble columns gleamed in sunlight, before legions marched in measured rhythm across stone roads, there were only low hills beside a quiet bend in the Tiber River, where reeds leaned gently over the water and the earth held the warmth of long Italian afternoons. And in that landscape of soft wind and open sky, the story of Rome began not as an empire, but as a murmur, a small and uncertain beginning wrapped in myth and memory. It is said that twin infants were set adrift upon the river, their woven cradle nudged along by slow currents that carried leaves and fragments of sky upon their surface. And the river did not rage but moved steadily, as if aware that something fragile floated upon it, until the basket came to rest among the roots of a fig tree, where the earth rose slightly above the floodplain. And there, beneath the broad canopy of leaves, a she-wolf approached, her breath visible in the cool of early morning, her yellow eyes watchful yet calm, and she lowered herself beside the twins, offering warmth and milk in the hush before dawn. And the boys grew strong beneath her patient care, later found and raised by a shepherd, whose hut stood among grazing flocks. And as they grew into young men, their steps lengthened across the hills, and the air around them seemed filled with a sense of quiet inevitability, as though the land itself anticipated what they might build. Romulus and Remus walked the ridges above the Tiber, looking out across valleys where mist lingered in the early hours, and the sun rose slowly behind distant hills. And they spoke of founding a city, a place of walls and hearths and gathering. Yet even in their shared vision, there stirred a subtle difference, like two currents beneath the same surface. And when the moment came to choose where the city would stand, signs were sought in the sky, birds circling in wide arcs overhead, and disagreement settled between them, not as sudden fury, but as something heavier, something that pressed upon the air. And in that tension, one brother fell, and Romulus remained alone upon the Palatine hill, looking out over land that seemed both silent and waiting. And there he marked the boundaries of a city with deliberate steps, tracing lines that would become walls. And Rome began as a cluster of dwellings rising from earth baked by sun and brushed by river breeze. In its earliest days, Rome was small and uncertain, a settlement of huts with smoke curling upward in thin grey ribbons, its people farmers and herdsmen who watched the sky for signs of rain and turned the soil with steady hands. Yet even then, there was a sense of gathering strength, of community forming around shared fires and shared labour. And as years passed, kings ruled the growing settlement, figures remembered through legend and fragments of tradition, shaping early laws and customs, building simple temples of wood and clay, where offerings were made to unseen forces believed to dwell in grove and spring and sky. And Rome learned from neighbours, from the Etruscans to the north, whose artisans shaped bronze and carved stone, from Greek colonies in the south, whose stories and letters travelled across sea and land. And the small city absorbed influences quietly, like soil taking in rain. The last of the kings was remembered as harsh, and whether memory smoothed or sharpened his portrait over time, it is told that the people grew weary of rule held too tightly in one pair of hands, and so they shifted the shape of their governance, not through chaos, but through collective decision, establishing a republic in which power would rest not in a crown, but in offices shared and limited, and consuls were chosen to guide the state, their authority balanced by a senate of elder voices and assemblies of citizens gathered in open spaces where sunlight fell across stone and dust rose gently under sandals. And in this new arrangement, Rome found a rhythm, imperfect yet resilient, and year by year the Republic expanded its reach beyond its hills, first to nearby settlements, then to broader stretches of Italy, forging alliances and sometimes engaging in conflict. Yet even in warfare there was deliberation, the slow assembling of legions, the measured building of camps at day's end where tents were aligned in careful rows and watchfires burned low beneath stars. Roads began to extend from the city like threads spun outward across the peninsula, straight and enduring, paved with fitted stones that held firm through seasons of heat and rain. And along these roads moved soldiers and merchants, farmers bringing produce to market, envoys carrying messages sealed in wax, and Rome's presence deepened across valleys and mountains, its influence growing not only through force, but through the steady integration of those it encountered, granting varying degrees of citizenship and weaving diverse communities into its fabric. And the Republic's institutions adapted to the widening world, sometimes strained by it, sometimes strengthened. Across the sea lay Carthage, a great maritime power whose ships crossed Mediterranean waters with practiced ease. And between Rome and Carthage unfolded the long Punic Wars, conflicts that spanned decades and reshaped the Western world. Yet even these vast struggles were not a single blaze, but a series of campaigns marked by patient endurance, by winters spent in fortified camps and summers marching across fields golden with grain, and Hannibal's crossing of the Alps with elephants became a memory spoken with quiet awe. The image of massive shapes moving through snow beneath silent peaks, and Rome, though shaken, did not dissolve. It absorbed hardship and continued, adapting its strategies, rebuilding fleets, and eventually prevailing, until Carthage itself fell, and the Mediterranean began to be called Mare Nostrum, our sea, its waters reflecting Roman sails under a broad and untroubled sky. As territories expanded beyond Italy into Spain, Greece, North Africa, and Asia Minor, wealth flowed toward the city, and with it came complexity, social tensions that moved beneath the surface like slow currents beneath calm water. And ambitious men rose within the Republic structure, generals whose victories abroad won loyalty from soldiers and admiration from citizens. And among these figures stood Gaius Julius Caesar, whose presence seemed at once thoughtful and resolute, a man who understood both the machinery of politics and the quiet power of narrative. And as he campaigned in Gaul, his legions moved through forests and across rivers, building bridges with disciplined precision. And when he wrote of his campaigns, he did so in measured prose, shaping his own story as carefully as any monument. The Republic, long balanced by shared authority, felt the strain of concentrated loyalty, and when Caesar crossed the Rubicon River, a small boundary line beneath an open sky, it was a step both literal and symbolic, and civil war followed not as a sudden thunderclap, but as a drawn-out reconfiguration of power. Battles fought on plains and near coastlines where gulls still wheeled overhead, until Caesar emerged dominant and was named dictator. And though he enacted reforms and extended clemency, the old republican forms seemed to many in quiet danger. And in the Senate House, beneath a ceiling that filtered light into a solemn chamber, blades were drawn, and Caesar fell, not in loud spectacle, but in a moment that seemed suspended in stillness, and the Republic, already altered, did not return to its earlier shape. In the years that followed, alliances formed and dissolved like patterns traced in sand, and eventually Octavian, later known as Augustus, stood as the singular figure guiding Rome into a new phase, not declaring himself king, but accepting titles that conveyed authority while preserving the language of republican tradition. And under his steady governance, the empire entered a period later remembered as the Pax Romana, a long stretch of relative stability during which roads extended farther. Aqueducts carried water across valleys in graceful arcs of stone, and cities rose in provinces with forums, baths, theatres and temples echoing the architectural language of the capital, and daily life unfolded in rhythms of work and leisure, merchants opening stalls at dawn, bakers tending ovens whose warmth scented narrow streets, children playing beneath the watch of elders seated in shaded courtyards. The empire stretched from the misty edges of Britain to the sunlit deserts of Syria, from the Rhine's cool waters to the fertile banks of the Nile, and along its frontiers soldiers stood watch in forts, where the wind moved through tall grasses and the sky seemed endlessly wide, and within its cities diverse peoples spoke different tongues, yet used shared coinage, travelled common roads, and recognized the distant authority of Rome, and emperors followed Augustus, some thoughtful, some distant, some remembered with fondness, others with quiet caution. Yet the machinery of governance continued, taxes collected, laws codified, grain distributed, and monumental structures erected that caught the changing light of each day. In Jerusalem, in a province far from the Tiber, a new spiritual movement began to take root, its adherents speaking of humility and eternal life. And though at first small and often unnoticed within the vastness of the empire, this faith would, over centuries, reshape Rome's spiritual landscape. Yet in its early days, the empire remained devoted to its traditional gods, offering incense and sacrifice in temples where smoke curled upward beneath carved pediments, and emperors were sometimes honored with divine titles, their statues placed in public squares where pigeons perched and citizens passed by in quiet routine. Time moved forward, as it always does, and the empire encountered strains, borders tested by migrating peoples, leadership contested in moments of uncertainty. And in the 3rd century, a period of crisis unfolded, emperors rising and falling in rapid succession, the frontiers wavering like shorelines under shifting tides, economic pressures felt in markets where coinage seemed less certain. And yet, even in turbulence, there were daily continuities, farmers planting and harvesting, artisans shaping pottery, teachers reciting verses to attentive students, life persisting beneath the broader movements of power. From this turbulence emerged figures who sought restoration, and among them Constantine stands prominent, a man whose vision on the eve of battle was remembered as luminous. And under his rule, the empire shifted once more, Christianity receiving imperial favor, and a new capital founded at Byzantium, renamed Constantinople. Where the Bosporus narrows between continents and ships glide across waters reflecting both Europe and Asia, and the city rose with walls and domes that caught morning light, signaling a transformation that was gradual rather than abrupt, a recentering of gravity from Rome's ancient hills to a new eastern heart. Meanwhile, in the west, the old capital retained its monuments, but felt the slow thinning of centralized power, and as generations passed, the Western Roman Empire diminished, territories administered with increasing autonomy, alliances negotiated with groups once considered outside the imperial fold, and in the year often marked as the Fall, when a Germanic leader deposed the last Western emperor, the event itself was not accompanied by sudden silence or visible collapse of marble columns, but by a quiet administrative change, authority shifting as leaves fall in autumn, and life continued in cities and villages, markets opening at dawn, church bells sounding across stone streets, and the memory of empire settling into the consciousness of Europe like a long echo. In the East, what we call the Byzantine Empire endured for centuries more, preserving Roman law and administrative tradition, yet infused with Greek language and Christian theology. and its mosaics shimmered in candlelight beneath high domes, depicting saints and emperors alike with solemn gazes, and its scholars copied texts that would carry ancient thought into future ages. And though borders fluctuated and armies marched, the continuity of Rome persisted in altered form, a thread unbroken, though woven into new patterns. Across the lands once unified under Rome, roads remained, stones still fitted tightly together beneath the feet of travelers long after the legions ceased their patrols. Aqueducts arched across valleys where sheep grazed among their shadows. Amphitheatres stood open to sky where grasses grew between seats, and language itself bore the imprint of Latin roots, shaping words spoken in quiet homes and bustling courts alike. And as centuries passed, the idea of Rome transformed from political reality to cultural memory, from lived present to studied past. Yet its influence continued to ripple outward, shaping laws, governance, architecture, and imagination. The rise and fall of the Roman Empire, when viewed from a great distance, resembles the arc of a day, dawn beginning softly over the Tiber's banks, noon blazing across a vast Mediterranean realm, evening descending in hues of amber and violet as authority dispersed and transformed, and night not as obliteration but as transition, carrying forward seeds of what had been into new forms. And if one were to stand now upon the Palatine Hill at twilight, feeling the warm stone beneath one's hand and listening to the faint murmur of the modern city beyond, one might sense layers of time resting gently upon one another. The shepherd's hut, the Republican Forum, the Imperial Palace, the quiet ruin, all present in memory, and the wind moving through cypress trees would sound much as it did in the days of Romulus, much as it did in the age of Augustus, much as it did when the last emperor in the West set aside his title. And so Rome endures not as a single moment, but as a continuum, a long unfolding shaped by ambition and adaptation, by law and legend, by stone and story and its vast narrative. Like the slow course of the Tiber itself, winds onward through history, sometimes narrow and swift, sometimes broad and reflective, always moving, always carrying fragments of the past toward horizons yet unseen, until at last all that remains is the quiet understanding that empires rise as settlements beside rivers, grow beneath open skies, and gently yield to time. While the earth beneath them remains steady, the sun continues its patient arc, and the night falls softly over ruins and cities alike, wrapping all things in a calm and enduring stillness. Long before marble temples crowned the hills, and before the sound of marching feet echoed across stone-paved roads, the land beside the Tiber moved in quiet rhythms of water and wind, and the hills that would one day hold the weight of empire were covered in coarse grasses that bent under the breath of early morning air, and the river curved gently through the landscape, reflecting pale dawn light in ripples that carried fallen leaves toward the distant sea. And in those early centuries before written memory settled into firm record, small communities gathered on the Palatine and neighboring rises, shaping huts from timber and clay, their roofs thatched with reeds cut from the riverbanks, smoke rising in thin grey threads that dissolved into open sky. The people who lived there rose with the sun, their sandals brushing dust as they stepped into fields where barley and wheat grew in patient rows, and the earth beneath their hands felt warm and granular, yielding to wooden ploughs drawn by slow-moving oxen, and their world was close and intimate, defined by the arc of daylight and the return of stars each evening. And in this early settlement, stories were told beside small fires about ancestors and unseen forces, about spirits that dwelled in grove and spring, about lares and penates who watched over household and hearth, and offerings of grain and wine were placed carefully upon simple altars built from flat stones. As generations passed, the settlement thickened and broadened, paths worn deeper between huts, storage pits dug for harvests, and defensive walls slowly assembled from rough blocks, and neighboring communities watched one another across valleys, sometimes trading, sometimes clashing in disputes over grazing land or water rights. Yet even in conflict there was restraint shaped by shared geography, and gradually a political structure emerged. Kings remembered not only as rulers, but as organizers of labor, overseers of ritual, builders of early infrastructure. And whether each name preserved in tradition belongs to a single individual or to a memory shaped over time, their stories reflect a slow layering of authority. Under these early kings, drainage channels were carved to tame marshy lowlands, making space where later the forum would stretch wide and open beneath clear skies. And the first temples were raised not yet in marble, but in wood and terracotta, their painted surfaces catching sunlight in muted hues of red and ochre. And artisans from Etruria introduced techniques of arch and vault, shaping gateways that framed views of hills beyond. And through contact with Greek traders in the south came alphabet and artistic forms, pottery adorned with scenes of myth carried across waters in rounded hulls that creaked softly against docks. Yet power held too tightly can stir unease, and as the last of the kings grew increasingly absolute, voices within the community murmured of balance and shared rule. And in the late 6th century before the Common Era, the monarchy gave way to a republic, not in a single dramatic gesture, but through a series of adjustments and agreements that redistributed authority, establishing annually elected consuls whose tenure was brief and whose decisions were subject to oversight, and a senate composed of elder statesmen whose counsel guided deliberation in long discussions held within shaded porticos, and assemblies of citizens gathered in open spaces where votes were cast and decisions announced beneath expansive sky. This republic was neither perfectly equal nor wholly inclusive, yet it fostered a civic identity that bound individuals to the state with threads of obligation and pride, and the Roman concept of virtues, of duty performed steadily and without excess display, became a quiet ideal. And as Rome's influence extended beyond its immediate surroundings into the wider Italian peninsula, alliances were negotiated with neighboring peoples, granting varying degrees of citizenship and participation, weaving a network of shared interest that strengthened Rome's foundation. The legions that formed during these centuries were not yet the vast professional armies of later empire, but citizen soldiers who left their fields during campaign season, assembling in orderly formations beneath standards that fluttered in dry summer wind, and their equipment was practical and durable, shields curved and painted, helmets crested, sandals strapped tightly for long marches across uneven terrain, and they built camps each evening with disciplined routine, digging ditches and raising palisades so that even temporary settlements bore the imprint of Roman order. Conflict with Carthage unfolded across the Mediterranean like a prolonged tide, rising and falling over decades, and ships constructed in Roman dockyards slid into water with hollow echoes, oars dipping in synchronized rhythm as fleets moved toward distant horizons. And on land, soldiers traversed mountains and plains where olive groves shimmered silver in afternoon light, and Hannibal's crossing of the Alps became etched into collective memory. Elephants moving slowly through snowbound passes, their breath visible in cold air, a spectacle both improbable and enduring. And Rome endured setbacks, yet did not fracture, rebuilding fleets after storms, replenishing legions after losses, adapting strategy with patience rather than haste. When Carthage finally fell, its once vibrant harbour stilled and its walls reduced to rubble beneath a calm and indifferent sky. Rome emerged as dominant across the western Mediterranean, and wealth began to flow more abundantly toward the city. Silver from Spanish mines, grain from Sicilian fields, art and philosophy from Greece. And with expansion came both opportunity and strain, as disparities widened between wealthy landowners and small farmers, whose plots had suffered neglect during long campaigns. Political tensions grew slowly within the Republic's framework, reformers seeking to redistribute land and address inequality, traditionalists defending established privilege, and debates unfolded in the forum where sunlight struck stone and voices carried across open space. And among these figures rose men whose names would echo through centuries. The Gracchi brothers advocating reform and meeting violent ends. Marius restructuring the army into a more professional force. Sulla marching upon Rome itself in an unprecedented assertion of personal authority. And each episode left subtle fissures in republican norms. In this atmosphere of shifting power dynamics, Julius Caesar advanced, first as a young aristocrat navigating alliances with careful calculation, later as a general whose campaigns in Gaul expanded Rome's territory to the Atlantic shores, his legions constructing bridges across the Rhine with measured efficiency, and he wrote of these campaigns in clear prose that portrayed both strategy and inevitability, shaping public perception with understated confidence. And when his growing influence alarmed rivals in the Senate, the delicate equilibrium of the Republic faltered further. The crossing of the Rubicon, a modest river whose waters flowed quietly between fields, marked a point from which return seemed unlikely, and civil war followed, not as a single catastrophic clash, but as a series of campaigns across Italy, Spain, Greece, and Egypt. Armies maneuvering across landscapes where farmers continued to sow seed between marches, and Caesar emerged victorious, assuming the title of Dictator Perpetuo, and enacted reforms aimed at stabilizing governance, adjusting the calendar, extending citizenship, planning colonies. Yet suspicion lingered among those who feared monarchy's return. On the Ides of March, within the Senate chamber, where shafts of light filtered through high openings, conspirators struck, and Caesar fell upon the marble floor. And the city did not erupt into immediate transformation, but absorbed the shock gradually, as alliances reformed and power recalibrated. And from ensuing struggles, Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, rose with calculated patience, presenting himself as restorer of republican order while consolidating authority in subtle increments. When Octavian became Augustus, he ushered in an era that balanced continuity with innovation, preserving the outward forms of republican governance while holding ultimate control. And under his rule, Rome experienced a sustained period of stability, infrastructure expanding, trade flourishing across well-maintained roads and sea lanes, and monumental building projects reshaping the capital, temples reconstructed in marble, forums expanded, and the Ara Pacis erected as a symbol of peace, its carved reliefs depicting processions in serene detail. The Pax Romana that followed spanned generations, and within this relative calm daily life unfolded in countless variations across provinces vast and varied. In Britain, where mist drifted over Hadrian's Wall and soldiers kept watch from stone towers. In North Africa, where markets bustled beneath sun-bleached colonnades. In Asia Minor, where theatres overlooked blue bays. And throughout these regions, Roman law provided a shared framework. Contracts inscribed upon tablets, disputes adjudicated in orderly proceedings. Bathhouses became centres of communal life, their vaulted ceilings echoing softly as patrons moved between Caldarium and Frigidarium, steam rising in gentle clouds, conversations drifting above the murmur of water, and aqueducts carried fresh supplies across miles of countryside, their arches casting long shadows at sunset, while amphitheatres hosted spectacles that drew crowds in quiet anticipation. Though beyond the roar of public entertainment lay the steady pulse of ordinary existence, artisans shaping glass and pottery, scribes copying text by lamplight, farmers tending vineyards that ripened under Mediterranean sun. Emperors succeeded one another, some remembered as just and contemplative, others as erratic or indulgent. Yet the administrative machinery endured. Bureaucrats recording census data, engineers maintaining roads, governors overseeing provinces far from Rome's hills. And though intrigue sometimes flickered within palace walls, the broader population experienced continuity more often than upheaval. As the 2nd century waned, pressures mounted at frontiers where migrating groups sought entry or settlement within imperial borders, and epidemics spread along trade routes, thinning populations in cities and countryside alike. And the 3rd century brought a succession of short-lived emperors, military leaders elevated by legions only to fall soon after. And the empire seemed at moments to waver like a flame exposed to shifting wind. Yet even in crisis, structures persisted, and gradual reforms stabilized currency and reorganized military command. Diocletian divided administrative responsibility among co-emperors to manage vast territory more effectively, and Constantine later consolidated power, endorsing Christianity and reshaping religious life. And when he founded Constantinople upon the site of ancient Byzantium, he selected a location where sea and land converged strategically, and the new capital rose with broad avenues and imposing walls, its harbour filled with ships that moved between Black Sea and Mediterranean. In the western provinces, economic contraction and administrative fragmentation unfolded over generations rather than days, and when Germanic leaders assumed roles of authority within former imperial structures, governance adapted rather than vanished, and the deposition of the last Western emperor occurred with little immediate fanfare, an administrative shift recorded in documents rather than thunder. And life continued across former Roman lands, churches replacing temples, Latin evolving into distinct regional languages, villas transitioning into medieval estates. In the Eastern Empire, Roman law was codified under Justinian, whose compilers gathered centuries of legal thought into enduring form, and Hagia Sophia rose in Constantinople with a dome that seemed to hover above worshippers like suspended sky, mosaics shimmering in candlelight. And though centuries later the city would fall to Ottoman forces, its long endurance testified to Rome's capacity for transformation. Through it all, the physical remnants of empire remained etched into landscape. Roads stretching straight across rolling hills, bridges spanning rivers with arches intact, milestones bearing inscriptions weathered but legible, and in quiet countryside shepherds grazed flocks beside ruins whose stones retained warmth from sun, unaware perhaps of precise dates, yet living within geography shaped by Roman design. The rise and fall of the Roman Empire was not a single ascent, followed by abrupt collapse, but a long continuum of growth, adaptation, strain, and transformation, unfolding across more than a millennium. And if one stands today beside the Tiber at dusk, watching reflections of fading light ripple across its surface, the distant hum of modern life blending with the rustle of leaves, one might sense that beneath present sound lies an older rhythm, steady and unhurried, the memory of legions marching, of senators debating, of emperors contemplating governance, all dissolved into the broader flow of time, and the hills remain. The river continues its course toward the sea, and the story of Rome rests not only in books or ruins, but in the enduring patterns of law, language, and architecture that shape the world still, carried forward quietly, like the river itself, into the soft and gathering night. And as the centuries unfolded beyond the firm authority of Augustus, the empire settled into habits of endurance, and the city of Rome itself breathed in a steady rhythm of dawn and dusk, its streets filling each morning with vendors arranging figs and olives upon woven trays, with bakers lifting loaves from brick ovens whose warmth spread into narrow alleys, with magistrates walking beneath colonnades where pigeons fluttered between marble capitals. And though politics moved in chambers of polished stone, the greater part of life flowed gently through courtyards and workshops and fields beyond the walls. The Forum Romanum, once a marshy hollow drained by early kings, now stood as the civic heart, its paving stones worn smooth by countless sandals, and statues of statesmen and generals cast long shadows that shifted with the sun's arc. And there petitions were presented, contracts witnessed, triumphs celebrated, and though speeches could stir emotion, the structure of the republic-turned-empire encouraged continuity over chaos, each office defined, each ritual performed with care. And even as emperors accumulated honors, the forms of governance retained an appearance of tradition, as if the old republic still lingered in ceremonial gesture. Under Tiberius, the empire continued much as before, administration steady, frontiers guarded, taxes collected with quiet efficiency. And though suspicion and withdrawal marked his later years, the machinery of state did not falter, and after him came emperors whose temperaments varied like seasons. Caligula remembered in whispers for excess, Claudius for scholarship and expansion into Britain, where fog rolled low over green hills, and Nero for artistic ambition and for the great fire that once swept through Rome, flames rising against night sky, while citizens carried what they could through smoke-filled streets. Yet even disaster did not erase the city, for reconstruction followed, brick and marble replacing timber, avenues widened, and life resumed its pulse. The Flavian dynasty restored a sense of solidity after civil war, and the Colosseum rose upon land once claimed by private pleasure, its massive arches framing glimpses of sky, and within its vast interior crowds gathered, their murmurs blending into a low and continuous hum as spectacles unfolded below. Yet beyond the arena's sand lay quieter spaces, libraries where scrolls were unrolled in lamplight, gardens where fountains whispered into tiled basins, temples where incense drifted upward in pale spirals. Trajan extended Rome's borders to their greatest reach, legions crossing the Danube into Dacia, where forests stretched thick and rivers ran cold, and monuments commemorated these campaigns with carved scenes of soldiers and standards winding around tall columns. Yet conquest brought not only territory but integration. Roads laid through new provinces, cities planned with familiar grids, baths and forums constructed to mirror those of the capital, and merchants traveled safely along these arteries, carrying amber, silk, spices, and grain beneath wide skies. Hadrian, contemplative and traveled, walked the empire's edges himself, visiting Britain where he ordered the construction of a wall that ran across rolling moorland, stone blocks fitted tightly, mile castles spaced at regular intervals, and from those ramparts soldiers looked northward into mist that obscured distant hills. And though the wall marked a boundary, it also symbolized a pause, a consolidation rather than further expansion. And Hadrian's villa at Tivoli reflected his appreciation for beauty and reflection. Pools mirroring cypress trees, colonnades curving around quiet courtyards. The Antonine emperors presided over what later generations would remember as a golden age. Yet even within its calm, there were undercurrents, plagues that moved silently along trade routes, emptying homes and leaving streets quieter than before. And Marcus Aurelius, philosopher-emperor, wrote meditations to himself while campaigns along the Danube required his presence, and his thoughts, composed in simple language, reflected on duty and transience, on the briefness of human life beneath an infinite sky. After his passing, instability returned in cycles. The 3rd century marked by rapid changes in leadership, emperors proclaimed by distant legions and challenged by rivals before their rule had fully settled. And along the Rhine and eastern frontiers, pressures mounted as groups sought entry into imperial lands, some as raiders, others as settlers, and cities fortified their walls, gates reinforced with iron. Yet inside those walls, daily life persisted, craftsmen hammering metal, children learning letters scratched into wax tablets, priests conducting rites before household shrines. Economic strains manifested in fluctuating coinage, silver content reduced, trust shifting gradually, and Diocletian sought to restore order through sweeping reforms, dividing the empire into manageable units governed by tetrarchs, co-emperors sharing authority across vast distances. And though the arrangement required delicate balance, it brought temporary stability, and administrative centers flourished beyond Rome itself. Milan, Nicomedia, Trier, each city reflecting imperial presence in architecture and ceremony. It was in this era that Christianity, once a marginal faith practiced quietly in homes and catacombs, emerged into public acceptance. Constantine's conversion altering imperial policy, and the Edict of Milan granting tolerance, and basilicas rose where once temples to Jupiter or Mars had stood, their interiors spacious and light-filled, hymns echoing softly beneath wooden rafters, and religious identity gradually wove itself into civic life, bishops assuming roles of influence alongside governors and magistrates. When Constantine established Constantinople, he selected a site of luminous beauty, where waters of the Bosporus shimmered between Europe and Asia, and the city's walls enclosed neighborhoods of traders and scholars, artisans and clergy, and its forums and palaces reflected both Roman heritage and new Christian symbolism. And from this eastern capital, imperial focus shifted, leaving Rome to stand more as a monument than as administrative heart. In the West, demographic and economic challenges deepened across the 4th and 5th centuries, rural estates growing more self-sufficient as centralized control waned, and as Germanic leaders entered imperial service, commanding troops and governing regions, identities blended gradually. Roman and Gothic, Latin and Germanic tongues, spoken side by side in marketplaces. And when Alaric's forces entered Rome in the early 5th century, the city felt a shock that resonated symbolically more than materially. For though treasures were taken and fear spread briefly, the structures of society endured. The deposition of Romulus Augustulus in 476 did not bring immediate silence or visible ruin, but rather marked a transition in which authority in the West passed into the hands of rulers who maintained many Roman customs, issuing laws in Latin, upholding aspects of Roman administration, and across former provinces, bishops and local elites preserved order in familiar patterns. While in the East, the Byzantine emperors continued to consider themselves heirs of Rome, maintaining embassies, armies, and intricate court rituals beneath gilded ceilings. Centuries later, Justinian would seek to reclaim lost Western territories, his generals marching through Italy and North Africa, in campaigns that stirred old landscapes with new banners, and he commissioned the compilation of Roman law into a codified corpus that would influence legal systems far beyond his reign. And in Constantinople, the dome of Hagia Sophia soared above congregations, its interior suffused with filtered light that seemed to dissolve stone into radiance. Even as the medieval world took shape across Europe, the imprint of Rome remained in roads that guided trade, in legal principles embedded in charters, in languages derived from Latin that flowed in speech and song, and ruins of amphitheatres and aqueducts stood as silent witnesses, their arches framing sky and cloud as they had centuries before, and shepherds rested in their shade, unaware perhaps of emperors' names, yet living among stones shaped by ancient hands. Over long stretches of time, what had once been an empire of unparalleled reach became a memory layered within cultural consciousness, studied by scholars in monasteries who copied manuscripts by candlelight, rediscovered by Renaissance thinkers who walked among ruins and imagined the vigor of earlier ages, and Rome's story transformed from lived governance into inspiration, caution, foundation. And if one lingers upon the Palatine at evening, when the air cools and swallows trace gentle arcs above broken columns, the stones beneath one's feet still hold the warmth of the day, and the city below hums in continuity with its distant past, and it becomes clear that Rome's rise and fall was less a sharp ascent and sudden descent than a long unfolding, like the slow expansion and contraction of breath, steady and inevitable. And the Tiber continues to move beneath bridges ancient and modern alike, carrying reflections of twilight toward the sea. And in that soft, fading light the empire rests, not vanished, but diffused into the enduring patterns of the world, quiet as the turning of stars overhead. And as twilight deepened over the ancient hills, there were centuries still to unfold, long passages of time in which the idea of Rome continued to shift and settle, like silt carried downstream and deposited in new and distant places, and in the western lands once governed by imperial decree, new kingdoms formed gradually, their rulers adopting Roman titles, minting coins stamped with familiar symbols, preserving administrative habits not from compulsion, but from continuity, because systems built carefully over generations do not vanish in a single season. They soften, they adapt, they are absorbed into what follows. In Italy, the city of Rome itself remained inhabited, its population smaller than in imperial height, yet persistent. Churches rising within the shells of former basilicas, mosaics replacing statues in niches where once Jupiter or Venus had stood, and the Bishop of Rome, later known as the Pope, assumed a spiritual authority that gradually intertwined with civic leadership, guiding communities through periods of uncertainty with rituals performed in echoing halls, where candles flickered against ancient stone. Across Gaul and Hispania, Roman villas transitioned into fortified estates, their owners maintaining agricultural rhythms that had endured for centuries, olive presses turning slowly beneath the same sun that had shone upon legionaries, vineyards producing wine carried along roads first paved under republican magistrates, and Latin speech evolving subtly in pronunciation and cadence, becoming French, Spanish, Portuguese, though still carrying the cadence of Rome in its structure. In Britain, where Roman legions had once stood guard along Hadrian's Wall beneath windswept skies, fortresses gradually emptied, stones repurposed by local hands, yet the straightness of Roman roads remained visible from hilltops, cutting across landscape in unwavering lines. And though Saxon settlements emerged and new patterns of life took root, The memory of Roman order lingered faintly in law codes and in the very concept of urban settlement. Meanwhile, in the Eastern Empire, Constantinople flourished, its markets filled with traders from distant lands, silks unfurled in vibrant folds, spices perfuming the air with warm and unfamiliar scents, and imperial ceremonies unfolded beneath domes adorned with gold tesserae that caught lamplight and multiplied it into shimmering constellations. And the emperor, robed in intricate fabric, stood as both political and sacred figure, a bridge between temporal authority and divine sanction. The Byzantine Empire, though different in language and culture from the early Rome of shepherds and senators, preserved the continuity of Roman law, Roman military structure, Roman administrative precision, and scholars within its walls safeguarded texts of philosophy and science that might otherwise have drifted into obscurity, copying them patiently upon parchment as seasons turned beyond thick city walls. And beyond these structured societies, in forests and steppes along the Danube and beyond the Black Sea, peoples moved according to their own rhythms, migrations unfolding over generations rather than in sudden surges. And Rome, once the axis around which Mediterranean life revolved, became one thread among many in the wider tapestry of Europe and the Near East, its influence diffused yet unmistakable. Centuries passed, and in distant monasteries monks illuminated manuscripts with careful strokes of pigment, their quills scratching softly in lamplit chambers, preserving fragments of Livy and Virgil, Cicero and Ovid. And though the empire had changed form, its intellectual legacy continued to breathe quietly through these texts, shaping thought long after marble statues weathered and bronze statues were melted down. When the Renaissance dawned in Italy, scholars walked among ruins with renewed curiosity, tracing Latin inscriptions carved into time-worn stone, imagining the cadence of speeches once delivered in the Forum. And artists studied surviving sculptures to understand proportion and anatomy, and architects examined the geometry of arches and domes, rediscovering principles that had once shaped aqueducts and amphitheaters. And Rome's past re-emerged not as political authority, but as inspiration, its memory shaping the rebirth of art and inquiry. In later centuries still, as new nations formed and new empires rose upon distant continents, leaders looked back to Rome for symbols of strength and governance, adopting eagles and columns, republics and senates, as echoes of an ancient model. And though these later societies differed in countless ways from the Rome of antiquity, the shadow of the empire stretched across time, subtle yet persistent. And yet, beneath all political transformation and cultural inheritance, the physical landscape endured with remarkable steadiness. The 7 hills still rising gently from the Tiber's curve, the Mediterranean still breathing in tides against rocky shores, the Apennine Mountains still standing in quiet silhouette beneath evening sky. And if one were to walk along the Appian Way in early morning, when mist hangs low over stones fitted more than 2,000 years ago, one might hear only the crunch of gravel underfoot and the distant call of birds. And in that stillness, the long arc of Rome's story feels less like a tale of conquest and collapse, and more like a meditation on impermanence and continuity intertwined. For Rome was never only its emperors or its legions, never solely its triumphs carved in relief or its decrees inscribed upon bronze tablets. It was also the farmer tending vines on a hillside terrace, the mother lighting a small household flame at dusk, the merchant counting coins beneath an awning, the soldier gazing across a frontier at sunset, the philosopher writing thoughts meant for no audience but himself, and these quiet human moments carried forward through generations, even as banners changed and capitals shifted. And so the rise and fall of the Roman Empire becomes, when seen across the expanse of centuries, a gentle arc within the greater movement of history, a swelling and receding like the tide along the Tyrrhenian coast. And though the empire's political form dissolved, its cultural current flowed onward into languages spoken today, into systems of law studied in courts, into architectural forms repeated in civic buildings, into ideas of citizenship and governance debated in assemblies far removed from the Palatine Hill. Now, as night settles over the ancient city and moonlight rests upon broken columns in the Forum, the stones appear almost silver in their quiet glow, and the wind moves softly between them as it once did when senators in white togas walked these paths, and when emperors gazed out over torchlit crowds, and when pilgrims later knelt in prayer beneath vaulted ceilings, and the Tiber continues its patient course toward the sea, indifferent to titles and triumphs, carrying reflections of stars just as it did in the days of Romulus. And in that continuity, there is a kind of peace. The empire has risen and it has fallen. It has transformed and it has diffused. Yet the earth remains steady beneath the ruins. The sky continues its slow turning above. And history itself flows onward like the river, never truly ending, only changing form. And in the hush of evening, when the last light fades beyond the western horizon and silence settles gently over stone and water, Rome rests within memory, vast and distant and enduring, a long breath released into the calm and unbroken night. And if we linger a while longer among the quiet stones of Rome, allowing the night air to settle fully and the sounds of the present to soften into something distant and indistinct, there are still many layers beneath the surface of this long story, layers that move slowly, like deep water beneath a calm sea, unseen yet steady, shaping the course of what rests above. Within the city at the height of its life, beyond the marble monuments and triumphal arches, there were insulae, tall apartment buildings of brick and timber, rising several stories high, their upper rooms reached by narrow staircases worn smooth by countless footsteps. And in those rooms, families lived close together, the scent of cooking drifting from one dwelling to another, voices murmuring through thin walls, lamps flickering in the evening as stories were told, and small tasks completed before sleep. Water was drawn from fountains fed by aqueducts that traveled across miles of countryside, their arches striding across valleys in long, patient lines. And though the wealthy might have private baths and gardens, most citizens shared public spaces, meeting neighbors at communal bars, where steam rose in gentle clouds and conversation flowed as steadily as the water itself. Slaves, whose labor underpinned much of Roman prosperity, moved through households and workshops with practiced quietness, some born into servitude, others brought from distant provinces, and their lives varied widely, some enduring harsh conditions in mines or on large estates, where the sun bore down upon fields without mercy, others serving as tutors, scribes, or trusted stewards within urban homes. And though their status was defined by ownership, pathways to freedom existed, manumission granting new names and new standing, and freedmen often became merchants or artisans, weaving themselves into the broader fabric of society. Women, too, navigated roles shaped by custom and law, managing households with careful attention, overseeing finances when husbands traveled, participating in religious rites that bound community together. And though political offices were closed to them, their influence within family networks could be profound, guiding alliances, arranging marriages, preserving lineage through memory and tradition. Beyond the capital, provincial cities mirrored Rome in miniature, their forums lined with columns, their theatres carved into hillsides where actors' voices carried across stone seats beneath open sky, and farmers in Gaul or Syria or Egypt rose each morning as their ancestors had, tending crops suited to local soil, yet now within a system of taxation and trade that linked them to distant markets, grain shipments crossing the Mediterranean in wide-bellied ships, sails billowing in steady wind, bound for Rome's harbours where docks bustled with coordinated movement. The Roman army, disciplined and methodical, served not only as instrument of conquest, but as agent of integration, veterans settling in colonies after years of service, bringing with them language and custom, constructing homes along gridded streets laid out according to familiar design, and along frontiers forts stood in ordered rows, their gates opening onto roads that stretched toward horizon. And within those walls, soldiers practiced drills, repaired equipment, wrote letters home upon wax tablets, their words brief but filled with quiet longing for vineyards or olive groves far away. Time carried the empire through cycles of stability and strain, and though emperors rose and fell, the deeper patterns of his administration endured. Yet the 3rd century brought a sense of fragility more persistent than before, as plagues thinned populations and inflation unsettled markets, and soldiers proclaimed their commanders emperor with increasing frequency. Loyalty shifting like sand beneath wind, and though fortifications were strengthened and reforms enacted, there lingered a sense that the vastness of Rome had become difficult to hold within a single grasp. When Diocletian reorganized governance, dividing the empire among tetrarchs, it was an attempt to match structure to scale, to bring order through shared responsibility, and monumental statues depicted the 4 rulers standing in unified pose, identical in dress and expression, symbolizing stability rather than individual glory. And though the system eventually gave way to renewed consolidation, it marked a recognition that Rome had evolved beyond its earlier simplicity. Constantine's embrace of Christianity signaled another transformation, and temples once filled with offerings to Jupiter or Mars grew quieter as basilicas echoed with hymns, and the cross replaced the eagle in certain spaces of devotion, and theological debates unfolded with intensity. Yet also with an earnest search for clarity, councils convened to define doctrine. Bishops traveling along Roman roads that had once carried legions, and the empire's spiritual landscape shifted gradually, not erasing what had come before, but overlaying it with new meaning. As centuries passed and the western provinces slipped from centralized control, the change felt less like a door slamming shut and more like a lamp dimming slowly, estates becoming more self-contained, trade routes less secure, urban populations shrinking as rural life regained prominence. And when the symbolic end came in the deposition of the last Western emperor, it was recorded in documents rather than thunder, a line written that marked transition rather than annihilation. In the East, the Byzantine Empire continued to call itself Roman, its citizens Romaioi, preserving legal codes and imperial ceremony, and though its language shifted to Greek, its identity remained rooted in continuity, and Constantinople stood resilient behind its massive walls, repelling sieges through centuries, its harbours protected by chains drawn across the Golden Horn, its skyline defined by domes and towers that glowed at sunrise. Even when the city finally fell in 1453, its stones reverberated with more than 1,000 years of accumulated memory. And though banners changed once more, the intellectual and architectural inheritance of Rome flowed onward into Renaissance Europe and beyond, shaping universities, courts, parliaments, and civic buildings that echoed ancient forms. And now, if we draw back even further, Beyond individual rulers and battles and reforms, the story of Rome appears as a long continuum of human effort, an experiment in governance stretched across vast territory and time, an evolving structure that adapted to challenges, sometimes gracefully, sometimes imperfectly, yet always moving forward until its form could no longer contain its own breadth. The hills remain, the river continues its steady course, olive trees still twist their silver leaves towards sunlight, and beneath the modern city fragments of ancient streets lie layered one upon another, like pages in a book, too vast to read all at once, and in the quiet moments just before sleep, when the mind drifts gently between past and present, one might imagine walking along the Via Appia as dusk settles, the stones warm beneath fading light, the air scented faintly with cypress and earth, and though the legions are gone and the emperors long silent, the path itself endures, stretching into distance beneath a sky slowly filling with stars. Rome rose, Rome transformed, Rome dispersed into memory and influence, yet its essence lingers not in dominance, but in continuity, in the way ideas travel across centuries as softly as wind across open fields. And as night deepens and stillness gathers, the empire rests within history's embrace, vast and distant, its long breath released into the calm and unbroken dark. And even now, as the centuries continue to unfold beyond the last emperors of the ancient world, the presence of Rome lingers in subtle and enduring ways, not as an authority issuing commands from marble halls, but as a quiet architecture beneath the visible structures of later ages, like foundations buried deep beneath a city that has been rebuilt many times, each generation adding new layers, while the older stones remain steady below. In the countryside of Italy, long after imperial banners had ceased to wave above the Forum, farmers still walked the same terraces carved into hillsides during the Republic, guiding ploughs through soil enriched by countless seasons of cultivation, and shepherds guided flocks along paths first marked by Roman surveyors who measured land with rope and rod. And the rhythm of agricultural life continued, sowing in autumn, harvesting in summer, pressing olives in stone mills whose design had changed little across the centuries. Across Europe, monasteries rose upon remote hills or beside quiet rivers, their cloisters enclosing gardens arranged in careful symmetry, and within those walls, monks copied texts preserved from antiquity, their hands moving patiently across parchment, preserving the legal thought of jurists, the histories of Tacitus, the philosophical reflections of Seneca. And though these scribes lived in an age far removed from the Senate and the legions, they carried forward the intellectual inheritance of Rome, safeguarding it through times when war and fragmentation reshaped political landscapes. In cities that grew upon the ruins of Roman settlements, old amphitheaters became marketplaces, their curved walls sheltering stalls where traders displayed cloth and grain, and aqueduct arches framed new dwellings constructed from reclaimed stone. And though the names of emperors faded from common speech, the imprint of Roman engineering remained in the durability of roads and bridges that continued to guide movement across valleys and rivers. The concept of law, so central to Roman identity, endured perhaps more profoundly than any monument, codified and recopied, studied in medieval universities where students debated principles of justice and governance, and in these halls the idea of a republic, of a senate, of codified rights and responsibilities, found renewed life, shaping political thought in lands far removed from the Mediterranean shores where these ideas first took structured form. And as centuries turned and exploration expanded horizons beyond the known world of antiquity, ships sailed across oceans that Romans had only imagined, carrying with them languages rooted in Latin, systems of law influenced by Roman codes, architectural forms inspired by basilicas and forums, and thus the legacy of Rome extended into continents unknown to Caesar or Augustus, carried not by legions, but by culture itself, by habits of organization and civic identity that had been refined over generations. Yet if we return once more to the physical landscape of Rome, to the hills above the Tiber, where cypress trees stand tall and slender against the evening sky, the sense of continuity feels almost tangible, for beneath the modern streets lie layers upon layers of ancient pavement, temples built upon earlier temples, churches rising atop former basilicas, each era reshaping what came before without fully erasing it. And in this layered city, time feels less like a straight line and more like a circle, gently widening outward. Visitors who walk among the ruins today often pause beside the Colosseum, its arches partially broken yet still commanding, and they may imagine the roar of crowds long gone. Yet if they stand quietly instead and listen, they will hear only the wind moving through the openings, the distant murmur of traffic blending with the whisper of leaves. And in that stillness, the monument feels less like a relic of spectacle and more like a testament to endurance. Stone shaped by human hands and weathered by centuries of sun and rain. And so the rise and fall of the Roman Empire becomes not a tale of sudden drama, but a meditation on scale and time, on how structures grow gradually from small beginnings beside a riverbank, how they expand through ambition and organization, how they reach heights of influence that seem unshakable, and how they eventually disperse into memory and adaptation, their essence absorbed into new forms. The shepherd's hut of early Rome has long vanished, yet the hills remain. The Senate's debates have fallen silent, yet the concept of civic governance persists. The legions no longer march beneath eagles of bronze, yet disciplined armies still draw upon organizational principles refined in Roman camps. The temples to Jupiter stand in fragments, yet the spiritual transformation that followed reshaped continents. The imperial palace crumbled, yet the idea of centralized authority influenced generations of rulers. In the vast sweep of history, Rome's millennium-long story is both immense and fleeting, a bright arc against the darker canvas of human existence. And if one closes their eyes and imagines the Tiber flowing at dawn, mist rising softly from its surface, one can almost sense the earliest settlers watching the same current with quiet curiosity, unaware that their small community would one day influence half the known world. And now, as night settles gently over the ancient hills once more, the sky above Rome fills with stars that shine just as they did in the time of Romulus, in the age of Augustus, in the final days of Constantinople, and the wind moves softly across stone and grass alike, indifferent to empire and yet witness to it all. And in that enduring stillness, the story of Rome finds its resting place, not ended, but woven into the greater fabric of human history, quiet as breath, steady as the river, fading softly into the calm and unbroken dark. And so, as the centuries stretched beyond the final emperors and the long memory of Rome settled into quieter forms, what remained was not a sudden emptiness, but a slow absorption into the wider current of history. The great avenues did not vanish overnight. Grass grew between their stones gradually, moss gathered in the seams of marble, and rain traced familiar paths down the sides of statues whose faces softened with time. Bells replaced temple gongs, chants replaced sacrificial hymns, yet the habit of gathering, of marking seasons, of building in stone and thinking in law, endured. In the eastern lands, long after the Western court had faded, Constantinople held its vigil between two seas, its walls weathering siege after siege, its markets filled with murmured bargaining and the scent of spice, its scholars preserving texts that would one day drift westward again, like seeds carried on wind. When at last that city too changed hands, it did so beneath a sky unchanged, gulls circling above the Golden Horn as they had for centuries, waves brushing the harbour stones in the same patient rhythm. Across Europe, the memory of Rome stirred quietly in the minds of those who studied ruins and manuscripts. Architects traced the curve of arches. Lawmakers studied ancient codes. Artists sketched fragments of statues half buried in earth. The empire no longer commanded armies, yet its ideas traveled farther than legions ever had, settling into languages, institutions, and habits of thought that shaped distant generations. And still, the Tiber flows. It flows past the Palatine, past the Forum, past bridges both ancient and modern, reflecting dawn light and evening shadow just as it did when the first hut stood along its banks. The hills remain patient. The sky continues its slow turning. What once rose in strength and confidence now rests in memory and stone, softened by centuries, yet not erased. Rome's story, in the end, is less about fall than about transformation, about how human effort gathers, flourishes, and then yields gently to time. Empires expand like the bright arc of the sun at midday, and they recede like twilight. Not in sudden darkness, but in gradual dimming, until only the quiet outline remains. And in that quiet outline, beneath stars that have watched every triumph and every surrender, the long breath of Rome settles into stillness, woven into the fabric of the world, steady as the earth, calm as the river, resting softly in the deep and unbroken night.